So yesterday, the Las Vegas Raiders had a massive matchup against the Denver Broncos. This was a game that if the Raiders won, could have potentially flipped their season, and they could have possibly been a team that could have slipped into the playoffs. 3-2 is such a great record at this point after the schedule that you kind of had, especially coming into the season with a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator. 3-2 would have been a really, really good spot for the Raiders to be in, but instead the Raiders were not able to get it done. And today we're going to talk about the biggest issue I saw with the Raiders yesterday. And this is an issue that, if it's not corrected, is basically going to hinder the rest of this Raiders season. This video is going to be solely focused on Luke Getsy. We're going to 100% talk about why Luke Getsy is the shittiest offensive coordinator in the NFL. And we're going to talk about why the Raiders have to move off of this guy. And if they don't, it doesn't matter if you make the switch to Aiden O'Connell. He's not going to come in and have success. In fact, yesterday when Aiden O'Connell took over, the score was 10-20. Like, it was not a blowout at that point. Aiden O'Connell steps onto the football field. It's 10-20. You score a touchdown, it's 20-17. The Raiders are right back into it. Now, Aiden O'Connell did not score a touchdown. In fact, because of some bad plays, essentially called by the offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy, we go 3-and-out. We punt the football. The Broncos drive right downfield and they score a touchdown. Now the Broncos are up 27 to essentially 10, and it's kind of getting bad at this point. And then on the first play of the second drive that Aiden O'Connell's in, he obviously threw a tight pass. Patrick Surtain tips it, and he ends up picking it off. And from there, they score another touchdown, 34-10, just like that, right? So to me, the game wasn't essentially over, but when Aiden O'Connell came in, Luke Getsy kind of continued to do some of the things that it's just questionable. You know, it's very, very questionable. And even at the beginning of this game, you know, the Raiders are technically up 10-3 at about the 5-yard line before a pick six ultimately flipped this entire game. But even at that point, I think the Raiders kind of got lucky a little bit, and I want to just talk about it. I want to start all the way from the first play of the game. So the Raiders came out, first play of the game. They ran a screen towards the left. It could have been a run-pass option, but essentially they gave Brock Bowers the ball. He ended up picking up 3 yards on the first play of the game. Then the Raiders on the second play of the game ran the football, and they ended up losing a yard. So now you're in a 3rd and 8, right? So the very first drive of the game, the Raiders don't have flow. They don't have rhythm. They don't have anything really going. They come out and run 2 average, basic concepts. Even that run didn't really make sense to me. It looked like it was some sort of outside zone run towards the left of the screen, but it also kind of looked like it was some sort of win back concept. Not 100% sure what it was exactly. But that play lost the yard, and then with that, now you're in a 3rd and 8. You know, most teams aren't picking up 3rd and 8s, right? I mean, like, if you're not the Chiefs, if you're not the Bills, you're not picking up 3rd and 8s. You know, if you're the Saints, if you're the Vikings, if you're a team with a good coach, average offense, generally speaking, you don't pick up 3rd and 8s most of the time, right? Or at least it's not a favorable down to be in. Now, we got lucky because Gardner Minshew ended up running with the football. Now, the play concept wasn't really that good of a play concept. You guys can look at the route, make that own determination yourselves. Gardner Minshew took off running. He was pressured a little bit. I think, you know, you bring 6-7 guys. He ended up running, and you can see that he's able to pick the first down up. And then on the very next play, he ends up throwing a 50-50 pass to Brock Bowers, and Brock Bowers makes a hell of a play. And Brock Bowers takes it 50-plus yards to the house. And the Raiders go up 7-0 against the Denver Broncos. But I want you guys to really think about what just happened on the game's first 4 plays. We run 2 plays that were bad plays, right? We're in a 3rd and 8. We get bailed out. Gardner Minshew throws a 50-50 pass to Brock Bowers, and Brock Bowers ends up taking it the distance. Now, this play that Brock Bowers caught, the Raiders have run this a couple of times. If you guys don't recognize this play, we ran this the first couple of weeks of the season as well. Brock Bowers picked up a ton of yards. It's the same route concept. The Raiders came back to it, and on this one, Gardner Minshew just threw it up there for Brock Bowers to catch. And it made sense for Bowers to get that 50-50 chance. You know, most corners are smaller. They're not going to be able to cover Bowers. And that's a great thing for the Raiders right there, right? To be able to throw up 50-50 passes to Brock Bowers. But then let's get into the second drive. So the score is 7-0 at this point. The Raiders have the football, and we're going to start the second drive of the game with essentially a 1-yard pass and then a run for no gain. And now the Raiders are once again looking at a 3rd and 9. So to me, once again, right, we come out here, we don't have success on 1st and 2nd down, and once again, we're in a 3rd and 9. Now, what happens on this 3rd and 9? Most teams don't pick up 3rd and 9s, right? If you guys don't believe me, go look at the stats, right? If you guys want to see them, link it down in the comments below. I have access to True Media. They have all these stats. You guys can see the numbers when it's 3rd and 8 or longer with the average team in the NFL, how often they're actually picking those up. So 3rd and 9, second play of their second drive of the game. Literally at this point, this is what, the 7th play of the game. We're in 2 back-to-back 3rd and long situations. Gardner Minshew once again bails us out. So we end up picking up the first down because of the fact that Gardner Minshew once again picks it up. To me, we have to understand that we can't continue to operate when we're struggling on 1st and 2nd downs, and then we're in obvious 3rd and long passing situations. We can't operate like that. Gardner Minshew's not a good enough quarterback to bail us out. He's not that type of quarterback. It's not going to happen, right? Now, on that drive right there, right, that second drive, we did a good job initially, right? We had an 18-yard pass to Jakobi Meyers. We did a pretty good job with a couple of nice runs. We got all the way down. And then on a 2nd and 10, unfortunately, DJ Glaze, the rookie tackle, false start. And that false start then put us at a 2nd and 15. And I want to talk about this 2nd and 15 play, because this is Luke Getsy for you again, man. If you guys keep an eye on the 2 tight ends at the bottom of your screen, you're going to get 2 tight ends that are essentially going to run right into each other. I want you guys to think about this if you're a quarterback, right? You know, a play in the NFL doesn't last 7-8 seconds. The average play is, you know, the ball is out within less than 2.5 seconds. From the time the ball actually gets snapped. All right, 2.5 seconds is what the quarterback generally has. Now, in 2.5 seconds, if Gardner Minshew is looking to his right, and he sees 2 tight ends about to run into each other, and then they eventually do run into each other, how fast does 2.5 seconds fly by in that moment exactly? Right? That right there is high school level offensive coaching, where you have in week 5 guys still running into each other downfield. And we're going to get into more of some of the issues with Luke Getsy's offense a little bit later on, but you know, I do want to just kind of recap some of the issues that I saw early on. So you essentially have a 2nd and 15 play call where 2 tight ends run into each other. And then you basically are going to check down on 2nd and 15. And essentially on 3rd and long, you picked up 5-6 yards, you kicked the field goal 10-0. You know, people think that an offensive coach's job is only to call plays, and you're wrong if you think it's just to go out there and read plays off of a sheet, because that's not the only job a coach has. An offensive coach has to install the playbook. He has to tell every play, hey, if you're the X and we're running this concept, you need to do X, Y, and Z. If you're the Z on this play and we're running smash or flood or whatever it is, you need to do this, this, and this. You might have a mandatory outside release on this play. And these are things that the coach has to install. These are things that the coach has to teach these players. Luke Getsy has shown us over and over and over again that he's confusing people. Because people are running the wrong routes. People are not, you know, they're running into each other. And that running into each other is different. That's not knowing the wrong routes. Running into each other is more so of, as a coach, you're not spacing your concepts properly. And we're going to get into the spacing here in a second. But, you know, you essentially have to settle for a field goal. When I get it, DJ Glaze false start kind of ruined that drive. But regardless, we end up settling for a field goal on the 2nd drive. The 3rd drive of the game, we get a 40-yard run by Ameer Abdullah, and that sets us up perfectly, right? And now, after that run by Abdullah, we also picked up a nice couple of yards after that. We had a couple nice runs from Madison. We had a couple of nice plays from Brock Bowers. We get essentially down to about the 4 to 6 yard line, and we're in range, right? Like, we can actually score a touchdown at this point. The Raiders can go up 17-3 if you score a touchdown here. And we don't score a touchdown. Instead, we throw a pick 6 to Patrick Surtain. Some people are talking about how the quarterback missed Brock Bowers and he was trying to fit the ball into Jakobi Meyers. People talked about how, you know, Gardner Minshew basically made the wrong decision within this play. And, you know, rewatching this play, I think if you guys look at what ends up happening within this play, to me, I'm pretty confident that Gardner Minshew was throwing the ball to Brock Bowers. In fact, I'm 100% confident he was actually going to Brock Bowers. I think what ends up happening on this play is there's a guy in the passing lane, right? Gardner Minshew is not 6'8", right? He's on the shorter side. Gardner Minshew is going to struggle when there's a guy right in his face, right? And I know from our perspective, we watch this play and say, Brock Bowers is wide open, get him the football. Well, we got to recognize this as a quarterback. You know, your vision's different. You're looking straight. There's a guy right in your face with his hands up. It's not as easy. And in fact, this guy having his hands up, it's what leads Gardner Minshew to actually throwing the ball high, right? You can see with this guy having his hands up, Minshew has to throw it over this guy's hands essentially. And with that, the ball also ends up going over Brock Bowers' head. Now, some people are saying, why did Brock Bowers not fully extend for this? Why does it seem like he just kind of let it go over his head? He let it go over his head because he knew there were route concepts also behind him. So you don't want to, maybe you get the ball and maybe you don't. Maybe you only get your fingertips on it and it kind of messes it up for the guy behind you. You are taught not to touch that ball if you don't think the ball is meant for you, right? If you know there's a route concept right behind you, you let that pass go. That's where I have an issue with this play. To me, you're going to run a power action, play action, right? You're running a fake power to the inside. The guard pulls to the right of the formation. Gardner Minshew rolls towards his left. And it's great. You have Brock Bowers slip out of there, and it's a perfectly designed play if Brock Bowers was the only route to that side. But trying to design some sort of flood concept to the left in a goal line situation does not make sense to me. This is arguably one of the stupidest play calls I think I've ever seen this season. I want you guys to just think about the spacing of this concept. You literally have like 6-7 guys all standing in the same general area. It doesn't make sense that you have 3 wide receivers and you're trying to have 3 different levels in a goal line situation. You need like 25, 30 yards for this play to actually make sense. Now, I'm not sure if Jakobi Meyers had a choice route and he ended up whipping it back towards the left. What would have made sense is for Jakobi Meyers just to run across the formation into the back right side of the pylon, right? Essentially him just run across the other side of the field. That could make sense with Brock Bowers slipping underneath, but it doesn't make sense for Jakobi Meyers to also whip back towards the left, and now you have 3 wide receivers standing in the same general spot. To me, that is a bad play call right there. And that's on Luke Getsy, right? There's nothing you can say to me that makes me feel like that's on anything other than Luke Getsy designing a bad play. Now, I will say this. Gardner Minshew should have still been able to figure it out, somehow get the ball around that defensive lineman. That's why you're getting paid $15 million per year, right, to make those plays. But if anybody's going to tell me this is 100% on Gardner Minshew and the offensive coach isn't responsible for designing plays, I think you guys need to open your eyes. I really think if you don't recognize that there's a flaw with the Raiders' offensive design, if you don't think there's a flaw with the Raiders' coach, if you think the only issue is Gardner Minshew, you're going to have a rude awakening when Aiden O'Connell steps in. I watched Luke Getsy with the Chicago Bears because I covered the Chicago Bears on the Football Scout channel. I make videos weekly talking about the Chicago Bears. I literally create content for a living. It's literally my job. I watch tape for a living. And the Bears happen to be one of the teams I've covered now for the last 2 years on the Football Scout channel. And I've watched Luke Getsy enough to know this is the general Luke Getsy special. Here's the shit that he's always doing. He's not a good coach, right? Now, I do think there were some other issues as well that kind of happened. On the very next drive after that interception, the momentum obviously flipped, right? I think all of us could kind of agree with that. The momentum at that point flipped. But the very next drive, unfortunately, once again, it's a typical Luke Getsy. We're in a 3rd and 8, all right? It's essentially the 3rd play of the very next drive. 3rd and 8, Gardner Minshew hits Jakobi Meyers, who's running an over, and Jakobi Meyers drops the football. We can't have that happen, right? Because if Jakobi Meyers catches that football right there, that changes the game a little bit, right? The momentum potentially comes back to the Raiders a little bit, right? So on the 4th drive of the game, right after the pick 6, the score's 10-10. Gardner Minshew goes through his reads. He doesn't like what he sees to the left. He comes back to the right. Jakobi Meyers running an over, and he hits Jakobi Meyers in the hands, and Meyers is not able to bring it in. To me, drops have killed the Raiders this season as well. Earlier, it was Devontae Adams that had a ton of drops, right? I think he had like 3 or 4 drops for the Raiders. Jakobi Meyers has also had drops. He had a drop last week against the Browns as well that I think impacted that game a little bit. And then he now had a drop on a 3rd and 8, which if you pick up, maybe you score some points, maybe the momentum comes back to you. And if that wasn't bad enough, then on the next drive, you have a 3rd and 5 and you run the football. Now, the thing with this drive here is it was actually a really good drive for the Raiders. Gardner Minshew got a couple of things going. We opened up some lanes by the offensive line. We were able to generate and pick up some yards. We're driving a little bit, and then the Raiders get into a 3rd and 5, which is a manageable 3rd down. It's actually a really, really good spot to be in, but for some reason we ran the football. Now, some people blame Antonio Pierce for this. And I thought more about this moment right here because I think this was one of the moments that defined this game. The pick 6 was a big part of it. The drop by Jakobi Meyers on 3rd and 8 was a big part of it, but I think this 3rd and 5 was also another part of it. because we ran the football, picked up 3 yards, and then on 4th and 2, we punted the football. Now, some people said, why would Antonio Pierce run the football on 3rd and 5 and then not go for it on 4th and 2? Why does that make sense? Why would Antonio Pierce do that? I'm not sure if Antonio Pierce even is involved with the entire, hey, Luke Getsy's about to call a run play. I don't think Antonio Pierce can just go there and overrule him and say, hey, we're not running it, call a passing play. I don't think Antonio Pierce can do that. All right, I think Antonio Pierce has put Luke Getsy in charge of play calling, and he lets him call his plays. And I think the 4th and 2 punt is something that Antonio Pierce would always do no matter what, right? If it's a 4th and 2, even at that point, we're going to punt the football. And I don't disagree with the punt. I'm actually okay with Antonio Pierce saying we're going to punt the football, but I disagree with being in a 3rd and 5 and you're not trying to push the ball past the sticks. Because the thing is if it's a 4th and 2, there's no difference of if you're 3 yards further back and it's 4th and 5. There's no difference if you punt the ball 4th and 2, 4th and 5. There's no difference. But being at a 3rd and 5 and then running the football for 3 yards doesn't make sense to me. You got to throw the football. So to me, that's on Luke Getsy for calling that play right there. But let's go ahead and switch focus. Let's talk a little bit more about Luke Getsy specifically from some of the past games. All right, some of the games in the past that I've noticed with Luke Getsy, let's get right into some of the tape from those games. We'll go ahead and get right back all the way into preseason, because that's where it really started for me, where I started to recognize that there's some issues with Luke Getsy's offense. Aiden O'Connell came in. He played against the Minnesota Vikings first team offense. He drove us all the way downfield. We're at about the 4-yard line, and then he ends up getting sacked by Dallas Turner. To me, the thing you are going to notice with this play is the fact that you got 2 guys that essentially run right into each other. That doesn't make sense, right? That's something that you get cleaned up early on in camp, right? You don't actually put that out there on tape. Now, it's okay because this was technically still one of the very first preseason games. You're still very, very early on in the process. This is a one-off type thing. Okay, you clean it up in the preseason. All that stuff makes sense. But that wasn't actually the case because this stuff continued and carried into the actual regular season for the Las Vegas Raiders. The very first drive of the very first game of the season, Zamir White runs what he thinks should be a wide zone potential toss play, maybe a pitch to him as a running back. And the quarterback thinks he should hand it off, and you can tell that the exchange was messed up essentially. And the Gardner Minshew just kind of pitched it to him, but you can tell there was an issue with the handoff there, and that play ended up getting blown up because of that. Right? If a play is not perfectly executed, the snap to the handoff, if it's not perfectly executed, a play's probably not going to work, and that's kind of what happened within that first play. Now, okay, 2 things, not a big deal. Well, in that same game, then you have Gardner Minshew who's running a run-pass option, and he wants to throw the ball quickly to Davante Adams. Davante Adams runs a hitch. Instead of thinking he's going to get the ball right away as soon as the ball gets snapped, there's miscommunication there. Gardner Minshew's trying to pull the football back, and then you fumble the football, which essentially is going to give the Los Angeles Chargers great field position, essentially gave them 3 points on a drive that the Raiders were actually driving on, right? So it's little things where the Raiders are making having miscommunication on, right? To me, this stuff gets cleaned up before the first game of the season. This stuff continued into weeks 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. You take this play right here against the Baltimore Ravens and just think about the design of this play. Think about the spacing of this play right here. Essentially, you have a receiver on the outside running deep, and then you have a receiver that's running a deep out towards that receiver. I mean, how would you ever throw this deep out if you're that quarterback? If you're looking over to the right, how do you ever throw this deep out? It's almost impossible to throw, right? There's just no way this is going to get open. And then you have a third wide receiver who's basically in the general area as well. The spacing of this play doesn't make sense. Guys are running into each other. Guys are confused. And again, that was week 2. We saw guys running into each other just in this past game, right? That play I showed you guys earlier. We got guys running into each other. That stuff doesn't make sense. But the worst thing that the Raiders do or have done so far is when Gardner Minshew throws a curl route and Davante Adams runs an out route and it leads to an interception. To me, that right there is the most annoying part of the Las Vegas Raiders offense because the quarterback and wide receivers aren't even on the same, concept. The receiver's running an out. The quarterback throws a curl. You have this other play where Jacoby Myers runs a curl, but the quarterback throws an out, right? So again, you have so many of these different type of plays where it's the same mental mistakes that the Raiders are making, right? And the thing is this is Luke Getsy's offense, right? He wants there to be multiple options within every single play. He wants wide receivers to have choice routes. He wants there to be run pass option elements on every single play. But the thing is then you got guys that are going to run deep, and then Gardner Minshew throws it back shoulder and the guy doesn't expect the football. You have so many examples like this on the Raiders tape. And then that doesn't even get into the spacing. That doesn't even get into the fact that guys run into each other. Or the fact that we're running plays that just don't make sense down in the goal line, right? You got 3 wide receivers running the same thing towards the same side. Like, those things don't make sense, right? Those things are on an offensive coach to have essentially corrected, right? Those things are things that an offensive coach needs to make sure that, he has it situated. He has it figured out. Last week, we went up against Myles Garrett, and Myles Garrett had so many one-on-one opportunities. And the thing is we did chip on a lot of those plays, but it just happened to be that we chipped with the right tackle, and we helped the right tackle. To me, you got to chip Myles Garrett, right? The right tackle can hold his own against the third-string defensive end for the Cleveland Browns, but it's Myles Garrett that you're going to double-team. But the thing is I don't think Luke Getsy's offense is designed in a way where he can just pick where you're going to chip. Like, I almost think that that's not something that's a part of his offense. I almost think Luke Getsy's offense is designed in a way where he just calls things and hopefully it all lines up, because it's clearly not thought out with the way Luke Getsy kind of runs the offense. To me, I think the best thing the Raiders can do right now is to fire Luke Getsy and hand over the play calling to whichever assistant it is. I don't know who that is. Does Marvin Lewis call plays? I don't know. Does Antonio Pierce call plays? I don't know. Joe Philbin? I don't know, right? But the Raiders are having huge issues right now because Luke Getsy's offensive play calling is really bad. And the thing is Aiden O'Connell's going to come into this game next week if he ends up starting, and it's going to be the same issues. It's going to be the same exact things that you guys are going to recognize. It'll be the same exact mistakes. It'll be the same exact just mental things, And it's so frustrating because I'm such a huge fan of the Las Vegas Raiders that I want this team to succeed, but then we're not succeeding, and a part of why is because of the people we have at the top. And I'm not talking about Mark Davis or Tom Telesco. I think those two guys are essentially just doing what they should be doing anyways. I think the big issue, I don't even think it's Antonio Pierce. I think Antonio Pierce, he doesn't call offensive plays. He doesn't call defensive plays. I think the biggest issue right now is the offensive coordinator, and I don't think there's anything more than that. Derek Carr's having success with the Saints. Sam Darnold's having success with the Vikings. Baker Mayfield's having success with the Buccaneers. There's a reason why all those guys are having success, while in the past, teams had written those guys off. Some were regarded as busts. Some you were like, can't win with these guys. But yet, when these guys get new offensive coordinators that know what they're doing, these guys turn their careers around, right? To me, your offensive coordinator is way more important than your quarterback. It's not close, right? We saw Gardner Minshew have so much more success with a competent offensive coordinator last year with the Indianapolis Colts and Shane Steichen. Pretty solid, right? He had success over there. He was having mistakes, but it's a lot worse with the Raiders. And I think a part of that is because the play designs and the install of the offense is a lot worse. It is what it is, man. Hopefully the Raiders are able to potentially figure it out as we go forward. The season's obviously not over. What we showed in the first, essentially 17, 18 minutes of this past game, if we can do that over the course of the entire game, we'll win games, right? But it's all about actually being able to do that. I don't think Gardner Minshew is going to be able to do that, to be honest, guys. This guy just, when he loses his confidence, he loses his confidence. When this guy's playing good, he plays good, but oftentimes he's not. And maybe Aiden O'Connell can be more consistent as a quarterback. So I think the Raiders should at least make that switch, see what the other quarterback can do. If he struggles as well, hopefully they make the switch at the offensive coordinator position. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys don't get angry about some of my thoughts and opinions. Again, this is my thoughts and opinions. I could be wrong. And if I am wrong, I'll admit it to you guys that, hey, some of the stuff that I said I was definitely wrong on. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, man. If you did, consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time with another video.